So welcome back to Sprague Homestead. So today we're going to continue talking about meat rabbits. And if you've watched the last video, we've already talked about what breeds you want to use. So today we're going to talk about housing your rabbits. When it comes to housing, you've got a lot of different options, from hanging cages to coops to stackers like this. So we'll go through each one and kind of talk about it and kind of give you an idea of what might be best for your meat rabbit setup. So the first thing you need to decide when you're doing meat rabbits is how much space does your rabbit actually need. Now, the rule of thumb that I was always taught, and what I've tried to stick by, is that for every 2 pounds of rabbit, you need at least 1 square foot of floor space. That means an 8-pound rabbit will need at least 4 square feet. Now, this is just going to be for bucks. You need to also add a couple extra square feet when you're talking about a doe raising a litter. So somebody like Berserker here, that is about a 7.5-pound buck, he lives in a 2x2 pen most of the time, and that's enough room for him. He's got enough room to move around, to lay comfortably, to eat, drink, be merry, and breed the ladies when they come. Now, that same size doe is going to need at least, I would say, anywhere from 5 to 6 square feet. It doesn't seem like a whole lot, but with a harlequin, especially when you're talking about weaning their babies at 6 weeks, you really don't need a lot of space because they're not huge bunnies to start with. When you get into the bigger rabbits, such as your New Zealand and some of the meat breeds that we talked about last time, you're talking about does that are 10 to 12 pounds. These does are going to need pretty large pens. I would recommend for New Zealand or any of those bigger 10-pound does that's going to breed and actually have a litter in there. She's going to have a nest box at some point with those babies. You're probably going to want a minimum of a 24 by 36 or a 30 by 36. So a good sized pen and lots of floor space. A 30 by 36 I think works out to about 7.5 square feet, which is a lot of space. But it gives them a lot of room for when they've got 10 and 12 babies in there. Okay, so when we're talking about cages, and we're talking about stacker cages, this is what we're talking about. It's usually anywhere from a 3 to 4 level stacker, so 3 to 4 levels of cages high. They have these trays, either in metal or plastic, that pull out for the droppings. They're going to have P guards to keep the urine into the trays, and they're going to usually have legs. Not all of them do. Sometimes they just have a cage wire setup that encloses the bottom for the bottom stack. This is kind of a different kind. This one's kind of for my grow out, so the cages aren't real huge in this one. For some of my Americans, I've got cages that are 30 by 36, but the nice thing about a unit like this is if you're going to put it in a barn or a garage or something along those lines, it's pretty much self-contained. Yes, you still get spills. You can kind of see there on the bottom, sometimes some of the feed gets thrown out. But the nice things about these is because they're self-contained, you can put them in a building and not have to worry too much about droppings being an issue. So another option for housing your rabbits is going to be a flush clean type unit. Now these units are very nice in that all the droppings go down into the plastic trays, and then you simply wash it out with a garden hose to wherever you want it to go. The problem with them is that they are very expensive. So if you have the time and the money to do one of these for your rabbits, the nice thing is they last a really long time. If you're in an area like ours where it freezes, because I do have one of these units, you do have to fight the ice a little bit. And when they get frozen, you really can't get them to drain very well. If you're in a nicer climate that doesn't get a lot of freezing weather, they are great to have. The big thing is they've got a drain at the one end. You're just going to have a place to drain it. Now, KW Cages, which sells the actual official flush clean unit, does have a manure separator, which keeps the urine from the manure, so you can take the manure straight out to the garden and let the urine drain off. Another option for cages is going to be hanging cages. If you've got a building or want to build an outside frame, you can actually suspend wire cages from chain, wire, however you want to do it. We originally ran hanging cages in our first barn, And we used just some chain available from Home Depot. It was like $10 for 20 feet, and attached it to the cage with C-clips. I really like this in that there was very little area for the manure to hang up. The cages stayed really clean. The bad part was, especially in a big bank of cages, you could get one really rowdy 10-pound rabbit running back and forth and it would shake the entire unit. So if you've got a place to hang it and anchor it to keep that from happening, they're great. If not, be prepared for a learning curve in that some of the rabbits don't like the movement of the cages. So another housing option for holding your meat rabbits is just the good old hutch. This was one that I got from a gal that was getting ready to relocate. It's not exactly the prettiest thing in the world, but it is a great big pen. It's almost 30 inches deep and it's 6 feet long. This is perfect for raising a litter of New Zealand's. She used it pretty much for fryer rabbits. We've used it for all kinds of stuff, from an emergency ward for an injured turkey to housing an overly aggressive rooster that was heading to the butcher pot. So you've got a lot of different options. Okay, so here you've got another example of a hutch setup. You can kind of see the smoked plastic on either end of the big setup. And then, of course, it's got a roof. So it is protected on 3 sides. These don't have front opening doors. They have top opening doors, which is a little different than what you usually see. It's made to house bigger meat rabbits, so you can kind of see that one pen that we're looking at there is a 2 foot by almost 5 feet. So you've got about 10 square feet. That's plenty big for even a 12-pound doe and a litter. The smaller pens are about a 2 foot by, I think they are 30 inches. So they're good for bucks, does between litters, or even your fryers if you wanted to separate them out by male and female. So whether you decide to build your own hutch or have a Craigslist find, there's a couple of things you do want to look for. One, make sure that they're made of quality wire. Things like hardware cloth, especially on the floor, is not going to hold up to a 10-pound rabbit and her offspring, even a 10-pound buck, as they like to thump. You also want to avoid hutches that are made of chicken wire. I've seen this a lot. One of our first hutches that I ended up having to rebuild when we lived in Mississippi, the sides were made of chicken wire. Rabbits will chew through this and nothing flat. You'd be surprised at how quickly they will tear it up. So you'll want to go with a heavier duty cage wire. If you don't have that where you are, the heaviest hardware cloth you can find for sidewalls will be fine. The floor really needs to be cage wire. There's a lot of places online, including Amazon, that you can order cage wire and have it shipped in. Home Depot will ship in cage wire for you if you've got a building project. And you really do want to stick with the cage wire. It really will hold up a whole lot longer because nobody wants to be replacing these things year after year. Your cage wire on your bottom needs to be a 1/2 inch by 1 inch. And that's going to allow droppings to fall through, but keep your babies from falling through as well, because you don't want to hurt your little offspring's legs. Even the fryer needs to have a good life up till processing day. Try to avoid, if at all possible, the solid floors. It's tempting to say, well, I've got a solid floor, it's going to be easier on the rabbit's feet, but it becomes a hygiene nightmare. You're better off with a cage floor that's made of wire and some of the nicer plastic resting boards to put in there to give your rabbit a place to lay to save their feet and prevent sore hocks. These things can be sanitized because they're plastic. You just pull them out, you wash them off, you dip them in a bleach solution, let them dry, rinse them off again, dry them, and put them back in. That's what we prefer to do here. You don't want a lot of buildup, and you don't want to be worried about bacteria. With a solid floor in your hutch for your meat rabbits, ammonia is going to be an issue because the wood is going to absorb the urine. Ammonia can be fatal with rabbits. So you're better off, no matter what kind of cage you do, if you're going to do a hutch, you're better off with a wire floor and some resting boards, or even just a spot in there that's got a board in there for them to set. If you decide not to go with a resting board and actually want to put a solid surface in part of the hutch, that's fine. But be very careful about if it's in a corner. You're better off putting a solid spot in the middle of your hutch than you are in the corner. Rabbits like to go in corners. So you're better off trying to keep it to where you can prevent urine from building up and save yourself the smell and also the cleaning hassle. There are two other methods of housing your rabbits that I'm not going to discuss because honestly I have no actual experience for them. And that's raising them in rabbit tractors or in a colony setting. Me personally, I don't advise either one. That certainly doesn't mean that they're not a good option for you wherever you are. Rabbit tractors don't work very well where I'm at just because we don't have a lot of vegetation year-round, being in the high desert. And a colony setting for me doesn't give me enough control over the rabbits to control breeding and health issues. So if you're looking to do one of those options, there are lots and lots of other resources online, and I would suggest you check those out. So that's it on our discussion about housing rabbits. If you've got questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments and we'll be sure to get back to you. Next video, we're going to talk about the equipment that you need to have for raising rabbits. We're going to briefly talk about nest boxes, waters, feeders, and all the other fun stuff like toenail clippers that you need before you start raising your rabbits. So be sure to come back next week. And like I said, if you have questions, leave them for me and we'll get them in one of the upcoming videos. Thanks!